Thank you for joining us here today, and welcome to the W.H. Croxford High School here in amazing Airdrie. I want to thank my incredible colleague, the MLA for Airdrie, Angela Pitt, for joining us here today. She'll be providing remarks in a few moments as well. I want to thank Marilyn Dennis, President of the Alberta School Boards Association, for joining us. And I want to thank our incredible hosts as well. Fiona Gilbert, Board Chair with Rocky View Schools, the rest of your team, the principal here at the school, thank you for letting us interrupt your day and steal a little bit of space for this important announcement. As anyone who lives in our incredible province can tell you, Alberta is by far the best place in the world to live, work, and raise a family. And we're seeing people from across Canada and around the world making the choice to move here. With all of the people flocking to Alberta, this has also meant that we are seeing more and more students registering in our schools. And at the same time, we are also seeing increasing complexity in our classroom and rising needs for specialized learning supports. I'm here today to talk about the investments Alberta's government is making in Budget 24 to address rising enrollment in our schools and address increasing complexities in our classroom, with the ultimate goal to ensure that our children of all abilities have the supports that they need to achieve their very best in school and in life. I'm proud to announce that through Budget 24, Alberta's government will invest $1.2 billion over the next 3 years specifically to address rising enrollment in our schools, and subsequently, we will also be investing more than $1.5 billion this year in learning support funding, including funding increases for children with severe disabilities or delays. Overall, the Ministry of Education's operating budget this year alone will increase to almost $9.3 billion. This is a 4.4% increase in our overall budget from last year and the highest ever spending on education in Alberta history. I'm confident these investments will help to alleviate some of the enrollment pressures on our education system and empower our school authorities to provide a world-class education that will set Alberta students up for a lifetime of success. Now, before I hand things to my colleague, MLA Pitt, I just want to unpack some of these investments in a little bit more detail and what they mean for students, families, and school authorities. We talked a little bit about enrollment, and as I mentioned, we are seeing significant increases in student enrollment in schools across our province, but mainly in our large metropolitan centres like Calgary and surrounding communities like right here in Airdrie, Cochrane, Okotoks, Edmonton, and other surrounding communities as well. To help address these rising school enrollments, the more than $1.2 billion being allocated over the next 3 years is expected to support 33,000 new students in the 24-25 school year. School authorities can use this funding to hire additional teachers and classroom support staff in order to help manage class sizes and help manage the growing number of students. This funding is expected to also support the hiring of more than 3,100 teachers, educational assistants, and support staff over the next 3 years. At the same time, Alberta's government will continue to support enrollment that goes beyond original school authority projections as best as possible. The Supplemental Enrollment Growth Grant, which gave school authorities an additional $30 million for unexpected growth in 23-24, will continue to be available in the 24-25 school year. These supplemental funds will be provided to eligible school authorities in the fall once we have determined their final enrollment numbers for the 24-25 school year. Now, as I mentioned, our government is also providing an investment of more than $1.5 billion this year alone to support funding to address specialized learning needs. This is in addition to the funding that we're providing for enrollment growth. The Classroom Complexity Grant will provide $43 million to support the diverse needs of students and address increasing complexity in the classroom. School authorities can use these funds to hire more educational assistants or increase their hours, provide more training opportunities for staff, hire specialists such as counselors, psychologists, speech-language pathologists, or as well hire additional teachers as needed. With more classroom support staff, school authorities will be better equipped to provide more focused attention for students with specialized needs, including those learning English as an additional language. And lastly, learning support funding will also assist with the Classroom Complexity Grant in a number of different ways. Other grants supported by the $1.5 billion being provided this year include the Specialized Learning Support Grant, the English as an Additional Language Grant, the Refugee Student Grant, the First Nation, Métis and Inuit Grant, the Socioeconomic Status Grant, the School Nutrition Grant, and Program Unit Funding. With respect to program unit funding, I'm very pleased to announce that we are taking steps to strengthen program unit funding, or commonly known as PUF funding, to ensure programming and funding addresses the educational needs of children with severe disabilities or delays. We've increased PUF funding by almost $6 million for the 24-25 fiscal year and are allocating an increase of $10 million in subsequent years. This additional investment will allow for 2 enrollment dates for the PUF program, one in September and one in February. This will ensure that all children enrolled and eligible for program unit funding will be able to access educational services throughout the year and be funded for that. Due to this increase, our youngest and our most vulnerable learners will receive timely early education support through more spaces and programs being offered over time. And so in closing, I want to restate, I am confident that by working together with our school authorities and by empowering them to hire more teachers and add more classroom supports, the investments Alberta's government is making in Budget 24 will indeed create a bright future for our children and our province. I'm confident the investments we're making will help address the enrollment pressures we're seeing by bringing more supports to teachers so that they can help our students achieve their very best. Thank you for being here again today. It's now my pleasure to invite my colleague, MLA Pitt, to provide her remarks.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you here for this exciting announcement here in Airdrie. I come here and speak on behalf of myself and the other MLA for Airdrie, Pete Guthrie, who's not able to join us today. And I just want to thank Fiona for being here, and Marilyn and Norma and Shelley. It's a great honor. And the team, Greg, I know you have played a significant role in this school as well, and you're dressed in the team colors, which I think is important to point out. It's no secret that there's no better place to work and raise a family than in Alberta, and Airdrie specifically. We've seen an increasing number of people choosing to call Alberta home, and with that we've seen significant pressures in our school system, in our hospitals, and in our roads. Today's announcement, along with the capital announcement on March 1st of new schools in Airdrie and Rocky View, signifies our government's commitment to support students through building new and modernized spaces for students and keeping up with enrollment pressures by increasing funding. This announcement, this welcome announcement of $9.3 billion is welcome for all students in Alberta. I think less welcome for Jason Schilling and the ATA, but I'm sure you can save some money by pulling those ads. The sound investment into enrollment and classroom complexity will help benefit young Albertans both inside and outside of the classroom to ensure that they are being set up for a lifetime of success. As Alberta continues to grow, I know our government will continue funding the education needs of Alberta families, of Airdrie families, including new schools, enrollment growth, and supports for complex classrooms. Thank you so much. With that, I invite our board chair, Fiona Gilbert.
Hi there, good morning. Thank you, Minister Nicolaides and MLA Angela Pitt. I am Fiona Gilbert, and I'm honored to serve as the board chair for Rocky View Schools. I would like to acknowledge today my board colleagues who are joining me today. We have Trustee Shelley Kinley and Trustee Norma Lang, as well as our Superintendent of Schools and members of our executive team and administration. So thank you for being here today. It is our pleasure on behalf of Rocky View Schools to welcome you here today to W.H. Croxford School. Thank you to Principal Derek Keenan and Croxford staff and students for sharing your beautiful school with us here this morning. We gather in the Learning Commons of W.H. Croxford, a busy and bustling high school that's full of energy and bursting with the promise of a bright future. This school first opened 10 years ago, a decade ago, with just 308 students. 10 short years later, today, it has grown to over 1,500 students with a utilization of 116%. This is the story of many Rocky View schools in our rapidly growing communities of Airdrie, Cochrane, and Chestermere. And we know that these are not just numbers that we spurt out there. These are kids. These are Alberta's future, and they deserve a world-class education. Rocky View schools, like other growing school jurisdictions in this province, need the space and the funding to keep pace with the increasing enrollments that we are seeing. We are very grateful to have received approval for our highest priorities in last week's capital announcement. Once opened, these facilities will help relieve the pressure in our school buildings as we have waited for these approvals to come. We look forward to working with the government to get these schools open just as quickly as possible and continuing to work with government for new schools in these fast-growing communities. Today's announcement is another welcome step from the government to address the challenges within our crowded schools and our classrooms as we work together to enhance learning opportunities for students that set them up for success. Rocky View Schools appreciates the additional funding for enrollment growth and classroom complexity from the government in supporting school divisions like ours. Our schools are seeing annual student population growth of 3 to 5%, combined with increasing complexities in classrooms. These new dollars can be put towards resources in our schools and our classrooms, helping to address some of these pressures. We will continue to engage in dialogue with the government on priorities to ensure that students can achieve their absolute best. Our board believes that every student needs to be fully funded every year. The current weighted moving average method of funding puts additional pressures on already crowded and complex classrooms within growing school divisions. I will close with a thank you to the provincial government for the announcements here today of additional funding and for your investment in Alberta students. We look forward to seeing the future positive impacts in our schools and in our communities. At this time, I'm going to extend a warm welcome to the President of the Alberta School Boards Association, Marilyn Dennis, and invite her to share a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and it is a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Marilyn Dennis, and I have the honor of serving as the President of the Alberta School Boards Association. Thank you to the Honourable Dimitrios Nicolaides, Minister of Education, for inviting ASBA to provide some brief remarks today on behalf of our members. We are Alberta's 61 locally elected public, Catholic, and Francophone school boards. I'd also like to express my appreciation to the Rocky View Schools Board Chair, Fiona Gilbert, and to the Rocky View trustees, including ASBA's Vice President, Shally Bazouk, for hosting us in this beautiful facility today. As the provincial association that supports our member school boards, ASBA's advocacy is informed by member feedback and the impacts of government's budget. ASBA has been working closely with our members to identify required supports to address historic enrollment growth, including an influx of newcomer students, and increased financial pressures amidst inflation, rising insurance costs, utilities, and other operational expenses. Following the release of the Education Funding Manual and operational funding profiles later this month, boards will need to make difficult decisions as they look toward presenting their balanced budgets to government in May. We appreciate government's additional investments into enrollment and specialized learning supports, as this funding will help address the unprecedented enrollment growth many school divisions are facing, and provide much-needed resources to address complex learning needs. Ensuring that these funds flow quickly and seamlessly to school divisions will allow for the timely hiring of additional teachers and specialized support staff. And cross-ministry collaboration for the assessment of our most complex learners will help to provide essential services without delay for students with significant challenges. Our members welcome all children and want them all set on a path toward success. Our locally elected officials represent their communities. We prioritize fiscal prudence and ensure transparency to the public for dollars spent in addressing the needs of students. We look forward to ongoing consultation with our members as they continue to find areas of collaboration and innovative solutions while engaging with the Ministry of Education. We appreciate the Minister's relationship with the Alberta School Boards Association, his unwavering support for the education system, and for being a strong advocate for Alberta's locally elected boards as the local voice for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us in person and online. That ends the formal portion of today's program. We'll start with questions in the room. If you could start with your first name, your last name, and your outlet, and we'll do one question and one follow-up.
Okay.
You can go ahead there.
Hi, my name is Edith Boisvert, Radio-Canada. Hi. I wanted to know what was your response to the ETA saying that there's lacking, I think, 6,000 teachers. You announced today enough funding for 3,100 staff, so it's not teachers. So how your government's going to help all schools across the province to help with this rising of inscription in school?
Yeah, thank you. It's an important question. So it's very important that we give our school divisions the flexibility that they need to make operational decisions that are best for their division. Hiring a teacher or an educational assistant in one corner of the province might be a little bit more challenging than hiring one in Calgary or in Airdrie. So it's obviously a very different dynamic. We believe our locally elected and independent school divisions should make those decisions, how they hire teachers, how they hire educational assistants, and it's our job to make sure that they're supported by providing adequate operational funding. And we, of course, look very carefully at their estimates and their projections for enrollment levels. They're collectively, our school divisions are forecasting to see approximately a 4% year-over-year increase to the total number of students that will join us in the next school year. In real terms, that's about 33,000 additional students, and we've provided funding for those additional 33,000 students. So we make sure we work with our school boards, get their forecasts about how many more students they expect to have, and provide funding to be able to support that.
Regarding follow-up, regarding the funding, you said it was about 4% more students every year. Your budget was a funding increase about 4%, 4.4 if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
But it's not even following the inflation. So again, what do you expect school across the province to deal with the rise of inflation and rise of student enrollment?
Yeah, well, there of course are increasing costs, and we're happy to work with our school boards to help address some of those costs. As an example, coming up very shortly on April 1st, the carbon tax will be increasing for not all individuals, but also school boards. And school boards are not eligible for any rebates, and the costs of carbon taxes and carbon tax increases are taking millions and millions of dollars out of the classroom. So we're working with them to see how we can put additional pressure on the federal government to allow these funds to be rebated, go back to the schools, whether that's for energy retrofits or green retrofit projects or energy efficiency projects. But those kind of dollars should not be leaving our schools. Those are significant increased costs. We, again, take very specific projections about how many more students the school boards are expecting to see, and we provide funding for that. With respect to our public system, collectively our school boards are expecting to see 4.1% increase, and the overall budget for education, which of course includes funding for transportation and for other components, is slated to increase by about 4.4%. This is, as well, in total, the government of Alberta, our operating budget as a whole entity is slated to increase by 3.9%. So the funding that's been provided to education is higher than increases that other ministries are seeing, and this is specifically to help address some of the increased pressure that our school boards are seeing.
Thank you very much. Did we have another question in the room? Perfect.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my question. Anna Frensvich from Discover Airdrie. The minister, or maybe Emily Pitt or Ms. Gilbert, can answer this. Can we get a little bit more of a detailed breakdown what Rocky View schools can expect from this massive sort of big bulk number in terms of the $1.2 billion over 3 years? What is that going to look like for 2024-25 school year for RVS?
Yes, that information will be coming. The funding profiles will be coming out in a few more weeks, and then you'll be able to see the specific breakdowns for individual schools.
Okay, and that will also be for PUF funding as well? More?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. That's all I needed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Thank you. And we'll just move over to the phones. Operator, if you could put in the first caller.
Eva Ferguson, Calgary Herald. Yes, thank you for taking my question. We have heard criticism since the budget was released, and I think I heard today from Marilyn and Fiona that while they appreciate existing funding, it still may not be enough, and specifically the funding does not keep up with historic enrollment growth that they've seen and will continue to see in the coming year. Overall investment for staff, not enough teachers, is allowing districts, you say, flexibility. But I've also heard them say that this spring's budget is going to be quite difficult and there will be tough decisions to make. So, I mean, given all these challenges, how do you address what many see as further underfunding that may in fact now be impacting the quality of education for students in Alberta?
Sure. I'm not sure I would characterize it at all as underfunding. There is, according to the projections of our school authorities, we're expected to see approximately 33,000 additional students join our school divisions collectively over the next year. And Budget 24 provides funding to support 33,000 additional students joining our system. So we, of course, are very specific in looking at the forecast of our school divisions and provide funding to that effect.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. I'm also hoping that you could address the line item in the budget, page 81 of the fiscal plan, which shows a 14.9% increase in funding to private schools, while at the same time we know the instructional grant for public schools is only going up by 4%. And I know the UCP has said they support choice in education, but for the majority of Alberta families, the high tuition costs of private schools are not at all a choice. So how do you explain this high increase in investment that can only be accessed by an elite few Albertans?
Well, apologies, Eva, but that's not entirely accurate. It's a 14% increase, you're correct, but the line item is not solely private schools. It's private providers and ECS, early childhood operators. So it's collectively that entire bucket of ECS and private school operators is increasing by 14. You mentioned it was just private schools, but it includes ECS operators. The reason is very simple. We're seeing some significant growth in those areas. As an example, with private schools, they're expecting to see almost an 8% increase in enrollment levels compared to the cumulative 4% that we're seeing in public. So the government provides funding to students where they are. And again, we're seeing a higher level of increase in the private versus the public.
Thank you, operator. If you could put through the next caller.
Shailene Skolsky, CTV.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. Yeah, just following up on that of my colleagues. You talk about enrollment growth of roughly 33,000 new students expected this year. If that growth is expected to continue as it is, we could see nearly 100,000 more students over the next 3 years. And during this time, you suggest hiring 3,100 new teachers in age. So what do you say to those who suggest this math just isn't adding up, given that we're seeing students enroll at a rate that's 10 times faster than we are hiring teachers, or at a rate under these numbers that we could see roughly one teacher hired for every 32 or 33 students? Is that sufficient in your eyes?
Sure. Well, I would say, again, our school boards collectively are forecasting to add 33,000 additional students. We've provided funding to support 33,000 additional students. Of course, as I mentioned in my remarks, in the fall, we'll take a closer look at our numbers and see, obviously, how those projections are landing, because it can be a little challenging to make projections for the fall at this time of the year, and then once you get to September of the upcoming year, your projections may be a little bit lower or even a little bit higher. And we then have opportunity through the Supplemental Enrollment Growth Grant to adjust funding and provide additional funding for school divisions who see enrollment increasing above and beyond their projected levels. We did that last year as an example. In November, I announced $30 million in additional funding to school divisions that had seen enrollment increase significantly above their original projections. So the same practice will occur for the upcoming school year.
Shailan, did you have a follow-up?
I do, yeah. Thank you for that additional information. Circling back again to this issue of public funding for private charter schools. Again, I know you have said this is about supporting parent choice and that we have a long history of doing this in Alberta and that these decisions are based on enrollment. And you just mentioned that the enrollment for private schools is expected at about 8%. Yet we see funding increasing at a rate of 4 times the rate of that for public funding. So if you can just explain that discrepancy, why we're, instead of just seeing like the doubling of the rate that we are seeing for public schools, it's actually increasing 4 times as much.
No, I'm sorry. The rate of increase for private school operators will be is forecast at 7.7%. I'm not sure your number of doubling that. Sorry, could you provide some clarification? I may have misunderstood.
In your last answer, I think it was to Ava, you talked about an increasing enrollment at private schools of 8%. Yet in the budget, we're seeing the increase in terms of funding for private schools going up about 4 times as much per student when you compare it to public funding. And yet you say it's about enrollment. So I'm just wondering if you can explain.
I'm sorry, I might have to chat with you. I'm not familiar with your 4% number increase. The line item for private schools, the funding that's provided for private school operators and ECS providers is increasing just shy of 14%. Our private schools specifically are slated to see an enrollment increase of approximately 8% and are being funded to that. And in addition, early childhood service operators are expecting to see some significant increases as well. As an example, just on that note, there could very well potentially be, by some of our forecasts, 20 new independent schools and early childhood service operators beginning operations in September of 24. Again, as we continue to see enrollment pressures, we see that across the board in terms of ECS operators opening, new private schools opening. We see that cascading throughout the entire education system. And of course, it's our imperative and duty to ensure that ECS providers, public schools, charter schools, private schools receive funding to be able to provide educational services.
Operator, if you can move on to the next question here.
Helen Pike, CBC. Thanks for taking my question. I also am looking on some clarity because there's a bunch of numbers jumping around here. So it says $24 million over the next 3 years for, like you said, private schools and early childhood education services. Can you actually differentiate and tell us exactly the amount that's going towards private? Because, yeah, the number of numbers that have jumped around in this press conference, I'm a little confused on.
No, your number's bang on. There's no confusion there. There's an additional $24 million in real dollar amount that's being provided over the next 3 years. That funding is going specifically to independent schools and early childhood service operators. I don't have the exact breakdown in front of me, but be happy to follow up with you with the exact breakdown of how that $24 million is being allocated between ECS providers and private school operators. But your number's bang on. That it's $24 million over the next 3 years.
Helen, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah. So with that in mind, in terms of per student funding, does the government have a process to treat each student, as a lump sum? So when you're looking at these different enrollment numbers and trying to provide funding for students, is there just a universal number that the government considers, or do students in the private sphere get allocated more dollars?
Sure. Private school operators receive less funding for each individual student. They only are funded at 70% of the rate.
Thank you. Operator, if you could please put through the last caller.
Duncan Bradley, Western Standard.
Hello, Minister Nicolaides. Thank you for taking my question. So you mentioned that you're allocating funds towards hiring more education staff. What will you be doing to recruit those education staffers?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, we provide funding to our school authorities. We provide funding through whether it's a base operating grant or classroom complexity grant or other grants, some as mentioned earlier today. And the school authorities, of course, have the flexibility to determine how best to allocate those funds and whether they choose to prioritize the hiring of additional teachers or prioritize the hiring of additional educational assistants. So we, of course, want to ensure that they have flexibility to determine the operational needs of their individual school authority.
Bradley, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. So you mentioned that the Alberta government supports school choice, and obviously we see that with the charter schools that the Alberta government allows to operate. Where do you stand on creating a school voucher program for private schools for parents who might be unable to afford the high tuition costs associated with them?
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing that is a priority for the government of Alberta in this regard is to ensure and support choice in education. When we say choice in education, of course, that means we want to ensure that parents have a variety of different options and be able to direct the education of their children. Be that, as an example, public educational providers, Francophone providers, Catholic providers, charter providers, homeschooling, or any other option. So it's important, and the government firmly believes in ensuring that these opportunities are available to parents so that they can make the educational decisions that they see fit for their children.
Thank you so much for joining us today. That concludes our press conference.